And if everybody could please mute their microphones. I hear someone in the
I can't
background.
find it. I'm trying to find it, Jen. I'm trying to find who it is, but I can't see him.
Okay. Sounds better now. Anyway, welcome to Understanding the Preliminary Title Report. With me on the call today, I have our sales team. We have Brad Fisher, Linda Federico Johnson, Robin Albert, and Val Allen. And our fantastic guest speaker today is Escrow Officer Stephanie Dimick, and she'll be going through the PowerPoint. So I've got just a couple of slides to share first.
We love Brad.
Good.
At least somebody does.
All right, Start in Here offers a mobile deposit to save your buyers trips into the branch when we have a resale transaction. So you can check with your escrow officer about the link to deposit your earnest money in mere seconds. That is part of a whole digital opening package called Start in Here that allows people to give us secure, confidential information in a safe, secure portal, and really streamlines the process of figuring out what we need when we get the prelim in to get going and close the escrow. It's also a huge tool in fighting wire fraud because it delivers the wire instructions right within the digital opening package. To learn more, check with anyone on my team. Your Chicago Title sales execs are trained and ready to go, or your escrow officer. And right now, and so that's a little process on the Start in Here digital opening package. And then for realtors only right now, we hope to expand it to lenders sometime in the coming month. We do offer an app called In Here that's a secure portal to just kind of take a look at what's going on with your transaction and receive notification when key milestones happen. You can only activate it by invitation when you have an active transaction with Chicago Title. But once you have an active transaction, you can get going and see all of your transactions. So it's a pretty cool little tool, and we're happy to share it with you. Now on to the regular programming. Take it away, Steph.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we're talking about exciting topic of a prelim. I feel like it's maybe a scary topic to some people because they get this report in their email and they're like, what do I even do with this? Or I just send it to people. My favorite thing to say about what should you do when you get your prelim is read it. So today we're going to talk about the things that it covers, what it talks about, and what it's really preparing your clients to see. So first thing is, what is it? It's an offer to issue a policy of title insurance. So we issue title insurance to buyers and lenders, but you don't get it until the end of the transaction. So the prelim is kind of like a sneak peek at what are the exceptions that we're going to be dealing with in the transaction, and what is going to show on that final policy that you get. Since the exceptions are going to talk about potential problems, it's a good thing to look at them ahead of time so we know what we're dealing with, and then the items that are going to remain on the policy when you get it. It's good to look at it because it's things that we need to address before the policy is issued. That's why it's called a prelim. You can kind of skip through these pretty quick, Jen. Go to the next one, it's fine. In bold at the bottom, it's important for everybody to read it. So everybody's going to get it. Seller should read it, buyer should read it, the agents should read it, and the lender, because everybody's going to notice different things that might pop out as red flags to them. So what are the key items that you need to look for when you get your prelim? If you're the seller or borrower, if it's a refinance transaction, the first thing you want to look at is your name on the report. So it's going to show the vesting, how your name reads on title. Sometimes we'll get a prelim on a sale transaction that will show somebody else's name. There's a lot of reasons why that could happen. There might be an uninsured deed that's on the chain and we're not ready to vest through to that deed yet without getting additional information. So it's kind of like the first hurdle to get through. You want to make sure when you get the prelim, it shows, yes, you are in fact the owner of this property. Second thing are liens, and those are the things that we're going to need to clear through the transaction. It can be things like a loan, like a deed of trust, past child support, tax liens. If the property is in a homeowners association, there can be judgments for unpaid HOA dues, credit cards that have gone bad, lots of things like that. Restrictions, CC&Rs that are on the property. Is there something that's going to restrict your use of the property that would preclude you as a buyer from wanting to buy that house? Can you not park an RV on the side yard? Is there a restriction on the kind of animals that you can have in your backyard? Things like that. You're also going to want to make sure that it's up to date, that the issue date is current on that. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's important later on. But those are some of the first few things to look at. Okay, the two types of policies we're going to issue is the owner's policy. The owner's policy is going to ensure clear marketable title to the buyer. It covers things that might arise on a title side for them. Second one is going to be a lender's policy of title insurance, and that's going to protect the lender's lien position for their loan. So if your buyer's purchasing a home, they might think, well, I don't need to get an owner's policy because my lender's going to get a lender's policy, but the lender's policy isn't going to protect anything for your buyer. It's only protecting the lender. So that's why there's two policies that are issued in a sale transaction when the buyer's getting a new loan. So the matters that are showing up on the prelim, it's going to talk about the estate of interest that's covered, the owner of that, the parcel of land that's involved, the exceptions or liens. Those are going to be the numbered items that are listed on the prelim itself. And then at the end of the exceptions, there's going to be other notes that are removed from that final policy, but it's just things that notes to cover and things to address. And we'll have a sample later to talk about that. Very end is the parcel map, which might seem just kind of like the period at the end of the sentence, but I always say it's good to double check that also so that you make sure that the right property has been searched. Some people own multiple homes in a neighborhood or even on the same street. We want to make sure that we searched the right property that's being transferred or intending to be transferred. Okay, so when you get your prelim, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have this first cover page. It's talking about that for the prelim itself, there's no liability that's assumed under the prelim. This isn't what's protecting your client. It's going to be the final policy that they get at the end of the transaction. Then the next page is just kind of like the quick overview. I think it's going to, when we scroll through here, it'll identify the different sections for us. So it'll have the title number, the escrow number. Sometimes these are the same. Sometimes there'll be a different number depending on what county the property's in. So if we're in Fresno County and it's a Madera property, it might have a different title order number, which is just good to keep in mind when you're communicating with the escrow officer or title officer so they can identify the file. It will list the address that we've searched. And if you notice real quick on the address, you'll see that there's not a zip code that's listed, and that's because we don't insure zip codes. Sometimes a question will come up that an address has a different zip code on the contract, and lenders or someone will want us to clarify what the zip code is, and it's left off because we don't insure the zip code. So that's why it's not there. So the effective date, when you get your prelim, it's going to have the effective date on there, and it'll always be a little bit behind whatever the current date is. And that's because the effective date is whatever our title plant date was when the prelim was generated. So documents get recorded with the county in person when people bring them in, electronically through title companies, and they'll post those documents. We have a title plant that then posts those copies to the title chain that we search, and it just takes time for that to happen. So that's why that date is always a little bit behind. So it doesn't mean when you got a prelim, if you opened this, you know, on April 15th, oh my gosh, my prelim's already outdated because it's April 1st. That's not the case. That's just what our title plant date was. And then before we close the transaction, when we release it to record, we do what's called a date down, where the title department will search the chain one last time to see if anything has recorded between the time that the prelim was issued and when we're getting ready to close the file. It's going to show the types of policies that we're planning to issue. Fee simple estate is the most common. That's going to just show on pretty much all of the ones that we'll issue. It'll show the vesting. So this is the owner of record, how they're currently entitled. So this is the one that you'll want to look at first. Who's the owner of the property? Is it a trust? Is it your seller? Is it their parents? Was it the parents' trust? And so kind of a lot of questions can arise from that first section. So for this one, because it's a trust, we want to just make sure that the seller of record is the same that's the trustee listed there. If it wasn't, then we'd have to ask for copies of the trust documents to make sure that the person signing is authorized signer. Okay. And it's going to have the legal description. Escrow contact, escrow number. And that's the first page. Then we get into kind of the meat and potatoes, which are the exceptions that are shown. Number one is always going to be the future property tax bill, because it's going to continue to run with the property, and property taxes show first because government gets paid first. That's kind of a good way to look at it. So the future tax bill is shown, that amount isn't out yet, so there's nothing there. Item 2 is going to talk about the current bill that's owing. So property taxes will be paid current in escrow and prorated, but it's useful to have the breakdown of the tax amounts on there, especially for your buyer, because it'll show what the current assessed value is of the property, and then they can use that amount to estimate for what their supplemental tax bill might be. Next one on this one is showing delinquent taxes. So those would be paid in escrow as well. And then number 4, it's always going to show on a sale transaction supplemental taxes, if any, because the property is going to be reassessed after it's sold. And so it's a good conversation to have with your buyers. Supplemental taxes are going to hit, could take 6 months, could take a year, but you will be responsible for those. And then I know you tell buyers, we tell buyers, lenders tell buyers, but it's just good to hear from all of us. Supplemental taxes are not going to be included in their impound account. It is a tax that they'll need to pay. That's the most common delinquent tax bill that we end up paying in escrow, is someone's supplemental tax bill that they didn't pay because they thought that it was going to get covered in their mortgage payment. So I just like to talk about that. If there's a community facilities district or Mello-Roos taxes, that'll show on there. When you get a prelim from Chicago Title, it'll be a linked prelim, and it'll have hyperlinks for the underlying documents that you can click on. So if there is a CFD or Mello-Roos, you can click on the regular property taxes. So like item 2 right here would normally have a hyperlink on the APN, and it'll pull up a copy of the current tax bill so that you can look at the breakdown for that and see what the current amounts are for that special tax district. Next is CC&Rs. Those are the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Most subdivisions have them, not all. If it's an HOA, it'll have really long ones, but it's, sorry, I'm still not sure. Ooh, my watch is talking to me, sorry. But always good to read those, because you want to make sure that there's not specific restrictions that would make the buyer not want to purchase that home. Next up is going to be easements. And so an easement is a grant of use for a portion of your property. And so it's going to describe what the easement is for and approximately where it's located. In this example, there's an easement for public utilities on a portion of the land. Some properties can have just a couple easements, some have a bunch. And if it looks like there's a lot or your buyer is concerned about the exact location of those, you can always order from us a color plotted easement map. And the title department will go back in and they'll map out for you on like an enlarged view of that specific lot, approximately where those easements are located. And that's important because if your buyer is purchasing with the intent of putting a swimming pool in the backyard, and let's say there's like a PG&E easement for part of the backyard, you don't want them to put the swimming pool in on top of that easement, because then if something happens and PG&E has to go in and make repairs, they'd have to go through, you know, the swimming pool to get there. So always good to double check and look where the easements are. There's a lot of, I don't know a lot, but I know this was on my parents' house, so I noticed it, that some builders in the early 90s didn't put sidewalks in on all of the streets, or maybe just one side of the street, and the city still wanted there to be pedestrian access. So there'll be an easement on like the first 6 feet of the property, even if there's no sidewalk there, so that technically people have the right to, like, you know, walk across. So hopefully most people probably don't even know that and wouldn't do that, but technically they have the right if there's an easement for that. Next up is going to be a deed of trust. And so these are really important to look at as an agent and with your clients, because a lot of times you'll have spent more time discussing the condition of their property with them before you brought the escrow to us. So, you know, if they've told you, oh, I don't have a mortgage on this property, I paid it off years ago. Well, if you get the prelim and you see there's a deed of trust on there, tell us right away if it's something that that owner paid off, because it won't register to us right away always that it's something that needs to be dealt with in a different manner. But I got to tell you, like this week, I've had, I don't know, 4 files with old deeds of trust that were paid off years ago that never had releases recorded that we're having to go back and address. And there's a few ways to deal with that. Sometimes they get resolved quickly. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes you can't find the entity that now would be responsible for releasing that deed of trust. And so the only option you're left with is doing a loss note bond, which is, number one, can be expensive depending on what the amount of that loan is that's being bonded. And number two, it takes time. Once a loss note bond is recorded, escrow has to wait 30 days for the notification period before they can record a release on that bond. So if you have, you know, a quick escrow or even a 30-day escrow and something like that comes up, it's going to delay it and you'll need to extend just to allow time for us to fully clear title on that. So deed of trust, always look for those. Make sure that it matches up with what your clients told you they expect to be dealing with in the sale of their home. Oh, solar. Solar is going to show up on the prelim if it's leased, if it's a power purchase agreement, if it's a solar loan. If your client tells you that they have owned solar, then there shouldn't be anything that shows up on the title report for that. So any solar like this does need to be transferred. A lot of companies have changed the processes for that. I know Tesla now has kind of streamlined everything to be initiated right through the seller's online account. So we really don't have a lot to do with that anymore at all. There's some solars that take a long time to completely transfer and some go quickly. So I would just say that if you know that there's leased solar on your transaction, have the parties start to work on that right away so that it doesn't hold up the closing. But when we do have solar on there, we'll have to get a release for the notice of solar contract and then the financing statement. So those are items 10 and 11 on there. This one, since the property's in a trust, it says that we have to get a trust certification. And so, like I was talking about earlier, when the property is being sold by like the successor trustee of the trust, we have to go back in and make sure that the person that's signing for the trust is the correct authorized signer, because the owner's policy is going to insure against heirs. And so we have to match up the person that's signing. Like I have a file right now, one successor trustee signed the contract, and then I went to get the trust documents. And the trust documents actually said that there should be two successor trustees. Both sisters are supposed to sign the document. So we had to go back and have the other one sign the contract and be added on to the escrow docs as well. Fortunately, this is a situation where both sisters were involved in the sale from the beginning anyway, and they were in agreement, but sometimes they're not. And some trusts have like 3 people that have to sign for them and things like that. So you just want to make sure that if you are dealing with someone that's selling on behalf of a trust, that you've had that conversation with them to make sure that they're the right person that has the authority to sign the documents. I guess backtracking really quick on that, you don't have to go back on the slide. The only thing I was going to say too is that lately we've had a lot of situations where people have needed to sign with the power of attorney, or they aren't signing for their trust because they're in a nursing home. COVID has kind of created situations where we couldn't access them for a while. So always let your escrow officer know up front if a situation like that exists, because there's different things that we need to obtain for the file for approval in those situations. And it can sometimes feel like we're asking personal questions, like, why isn't this person signing? Are they, medically not able to? And if so, we're going to need a doctor's note. It's not because we're trying to intervene or be nosy. It's just that we have to have documentation in our file why the person that's on title is not the one that's signing the documents. And a lot of times trusts will require even 2 doctor's notes. So when we ask for things like that, it's not always just because it's what we need. It's because this is what the clients established when they set up their trust, and it's that requirement, not ours. Next section is going through the notes, and it's just other requirements that get talked about. The first one on there, we don't insure transactions that deal with properties that are going to be used for like cultivation of marijuana. So if we know that, if we get an inkling that that's going to happen, we can't do that. Talking about requirements for recording documents, having documents notarized, those are the things that get covered. The other part is that it's going to include, some people talk about they need a title chain, a 24-month chain of title. So in this one, note number 5 is what talks about that, says no conveyances affecting the land within the last 24 months. If there were, we would list the information for those transfers. So if you're buying a flip property, probably there's going to be at least 1, maybe even 2 transfers listed there so that you can see. So that way you can tell if it's a property that's been recently transferred, it'll show that information on there.
Steph, I had a quick question on note number 6. None of the items shown in this report will cause the company to decline to attach ALTA endorsement. If there were something, is that listed here in note number 6 that's the reason we would be issuing a CLTA instead of an ALTA policy?
So the ALTA 9 endorsement, I think, is the 8. Well, it used to be the 8.1, which is like the environmental one that most lenders need. If there was a reason that we couldn't issue the ALTA one, then technically the title department is supposed to change the policy type on that first cover page where it talks about the policies that we're issuing. So by default, when I open all my transactions, I open them all with an ALTA homeowners and an ALTA lenders policy. And when title is doing the search, if the legal description is not just like a lot in a tract of a subdivision. If it's like a portion of this lot and a portion of that lot, or like a country property that has, you know, a more extensive legal description, then technically the title department is supposed to change that page of the prelim to say that we're offering a CLTA policy of title insurance. So the Alta 9, I think, is the 8.1 environmental endorsement. I could be wrong. Parcel map, good to look at, like I said, to make sure that we've searched the right property. It'll include a disclosure, I think now, that says that we're not insuring like the lot size, acreage. I get asked that question a lot. If people want specifics on that, then they need to have a surveyor go out and look at the property. So Alta homeowners policy, this is the one that the buyer's going to get. So it's protecting the buyer against losses for things that could have happened in the past. Sometimes those are things that take years to pop up. You might not think that there's a risk. Oh, why do I need title insurance? This was my grandma's house. It's been in the property for years. I'm going to buy it, but I'm just going to give, you know, the family the money and have them transfer the property to me. Okay, well, what if grandma had no loans on the property, but there was a really old deed of trust that was never cleared? What if there was an error in the legal description, things like that? I think the next slide is going to talk about some of the things that pop up that get covered by that.
Stephanie, before you move forward, there's a question in the chat. Can you remind me the difference between an Alta and the other policy?
Yeah, so one is the Alta and then the other is the CLTA, and the difference is the items that are covered in the policy. And when you get your prelim, the last few pages are going to go into specifics about what's covered in the Alta compared to the CLTA. And some of those are what are talked about right here, but it's going to talk about insuring against fraud and forgery, undisclosed or missing errors, things that are recorded in error, power of attorneys that are expired, mistakes in legal documents, deeds signed by minors, all these kinds of things get covered. And like I said, sometimes take years to kind of bubble up to the surface and be revealed. I think there's more too.
Let me check.
Yeah. Still stuff on the Alta, zoning law violations, encroachment protection. If your neighbor like builds a shed like right over both lots, that's covered. If they got like permits for it, we've got water, mineral rights damage, supplemental tax liens, map inconsistencies. These are all things that are covered in the Alta homeowners.
Steph, is it true that if you have a property sold between relatives, that it is not eligible for the Alta homeowners policy?
I don't know that,
Okay,
actually.
save that question for another seminar.
Yeah. So basically what we're doing in one of our main jobs is to resolve problems like these before you get to the end of the closing table. So if for some reason something comes up and there's a claim on the title policy, then the company is going to defend your rights to own that property, and they'll address what needs to be dealt with on that. So don't let anybody tell you that it's optional.
So we did not include the slides on the LiveLook pre in this
I was going to
particular
talk about that. Yeah.
thing. So let me, if you want to kind of outline what it is, I'm going to stop the screen share on this document for a moment, and I will try to find our LiveLook slide and bring that up.
Yeah. So the LiveLook prelim, if the property, it's a residential purchase transaction, when you get your prelim, it'll on one of the cover pages say, click on this link to view your LiveLook prelim. And it just shows you all the information in a different format. it color codes everything. So items that are, normal will be fine. If it's things that are going to get dealt with, it'll be yellow or red for things that could be like red flags. So it's kind of a good tool for you to use. Even if you're not completely sure like what you're looking at and how to read the prelim, I don't know what is going to be a red flag. Open the LiveLook, look at what might be red, and just pick up the phone or email, call your escrow officer. Hey, I noticed this item on here. Is that anything we should be concerned about? And just start a dialogue to get more information on that. But LiveLook, I think, is really useful. I don't know if everybody's taking advantage of it, but I think it's a really good user-friendly way to look at the prelim.
Before you go forward, there's another question in the chat. It's kind of a three-parter. It says, what is the process to remove easements that are no longer pertinent?
It's kind of tricky because it's going to be a quitclaim deed that needs to be signed by the person that's listed on there. And then maybe anybody else, like if it's an easement that crosses other properties. And so the thing about easements is a lot of them are really, really old. And so you have to go through and search who is the current owner of the property that has that easement. I mean, it is possible. I've had a few transactions where they weren't super old and the people were all still around and in agreement to do it. But a lot of times they're not.
If they're dead, it's probably a bigger problem, right?
It's really difficult to figure out.
And then the second part of that was what items are discovered through the color coded easement map.
It's everything, like everything's on there that's an exception is color coded in there. And then the underlying documents are all included like on the side for you to just click through and look at. So things that'll show up red, I think is going to be like, I think it'll be like a loan, like a deed of trust. If there's an SI requirement for a statement of information, that might come up red. And I don't think our prelim had a sample of that, but that's for us to look on the general index for liens and judgments that might attach to our property because of the person's name. And so Jen talked about the in here, the upfront documents that go out. If your clients fill out the in here, then most of the time we won't have to get a separate statement of information filled out by them. There's going to be enough that's provided in that upfront package that we can use to run the SI clearance. But things that'll pop up in that are going to be like judgments, tax liens. So if there's an IRS tax lien that shows on the prelim, because we can tell just by looking at it that it's our party, that'll be a red flag. But oftentimes that won't come up until we run the statement of information search. And IRS tax liens can take a while to order. It's like 10 to 15 business days. Child support releases can take up to 2 weeks, depending on the county. So those are all things that if you see them, we have to address them right away so that it doesn't cause a delay.
And Myrna, I'm not sure on your third part of that coverage is up to what amount for discrepancies. I'm not sure what you're asking in that part.
So
Well, we're
let's
gonna
say that
issue-
something was, there's a discrepancy on there and it's a dollar amount discrepancy. Does title cover it if there's an issue?
Are you talking about on the
What's the
prelim
coverage
itself?
amount or anything like that? That might
Are you
come up.
asking on the prelim itself, Myrna?
Yes, ma'am.
So any kind of dollar amount, we're going to get some kind of a payoff for. So the amount will be what's current, correct, Stephanie?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm following the question, but are you asking like how much do we cover when the policy is issued?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, so the policy is issued for the liability of the sales price. So like if it's a $50,000 lot, then you're getting a policy for $50,000 coverage. Does that make sense? Okay.
So I've got a couple of slides that I'm going to show really fast and Steph can just go through them. So the first one is when you get a LiveLook prelim, you're going to receive something like this. And it's going to have a link on it that says to view your new Chicago Title LiveLook report, click here. And then when you do click here, I'm going to stop sharing that. and go to this one. First thing that pops up is once again our wire safe thing, because we really want to prevent wire fraud. The bad guys are still out there really trying to divert funds. It happens every month. So this is the first thing that they'll see. And then Steph, do you want to just share what kind of yellow, and I don't think there's any red on this one, but what would be red if it was? There's a little color codes thing right here. Okay.
What does that say? Sorry, I'm blind. I have to scoot really close. Oh, items you wouldn't expect to see, like liens and judgments, court actions, hero, solar, lines of credit, things like that. So I guess they think one loan is normal, so they're not going to color code that red, but maybe if there's a second, they'll make that red. People that had FHA loans that did forbearance, they're going to end up having a second deed of trust on their prelim, because the FHA loans have that principal that was deferred recorded as a second with HUD. So that's been showing up a lot lately. Hero loans, they kind of are easy to miss if you're just looking at the prelim itself. So I'm glad they code those red in the LiveLook, because those will usually be listed in and around the property tax exceptions. And so one thing to know about hero loans is that they are not assumable. They were once upon a time, but I think that was really short-lived. So if there's a hero or PACE or Y-Green loan where the homeowner took out a loan to do energy efficient improvements on the house, those are included in the property taxes, but they have to be paid off when the home is sold. Let's see what else they have on here.
So over on the left, there's all the linked documents that you can pull up and click on. If there were CC&Rs, they would be in here and everything as well.
One thing that exists in a lot of properties out in Clovis, a lot of Harlan Ranch properties, is called a community benefit fee. And I think Lennar used to do that on a lot of their homes too. They called it like a charitable housing fee. And so those probably won't show up as red flags, but they'll be listed on the prelim. They're kind of right around where the CC&Rs are listed is normally where I find those. And so those are important because a lot of people don't know that their properties have those, even though they're listed. It just gets overlooked or forgotten, I guess. But they say that with the subsequent transfer of each sale, there's like an amount. I think Lennar's, it's like 1/5% of the sales price, and the Clovis Community Foundation ones are 1/10% of the sales price that has to be paid through the escrow to the Clovis Community Foundation. And so that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of that exists around this area that I wanted to say.
And I just want to say another note on the LiveLook. At one point about 6 months ago, the percentage of people that were actually clicking into this LiveLook report and looking at it was very, very low. And it's an incredible tool, but we do pay for it as a company to have this process done. So if we continue to find that people aren't actually interested in seeing this very easy to read version of the prelim report, there's a chance that they may stop providing that, because we really only want to invest in the things that people use. And so if you find this of value, please make sure to click on it. Please encourage your clients to look at it and read through it and click through it. This is the blueprint to the transaction, and we would love to keep offering this tool. I'm going to stop sharing unless there's something else that you wanted to cover on that.
All I would say is that if using that helps you to understand what you're looking at on your prelim more, then use it. And my favorite clients are the ones that ask me questions about their prelims, because I think that agents and lenders that read their prelims are the coolest. So be cool, read your prelim.
All right. Quick question. Do escrow officers or the team also explain with borrowers?
So we can go over the prelim with them. I will say that for my desk, the way that I run my workflow is we get the prelim and we send it to the agents, and we're expecting that that's going out to your buyers and sellers with their disclosure packages. So we're not necessarily calling them up when the file opens and say, you know, oh, we got your prelim, here's the things on there. We will call them if there's something that looks not right, or we have questions, if we need to figure out like if the right owner is signing, or there's funky liens, things like that. But not like as a general rule are we calling to explain it. But if they have questions, we will.
And we got a question if there's a difference between a regular preliminary and a deep dive preliminary, which I think is kind of the LiveLook. Are our regular prelims going out now all hyperlinked with documents? So it just mostly be the color coding, the information that's over to the left, and things like that that make it a little easier to navigate.
Yeah. Refinance prelims are not hyperlinked, but the sale ones are. I think commercial prelims are not hyperlinked, but you can request that. And then, like I said, those color coded easement maps, that's separate. So you just have to ask for that separately, and we can get those issued. Usually takes like 2 or 3 days to get those back.
All right, we have a few extra minutes and can open it up if you want to unmute and ask Stephanie a question. And if there aren't any questions, then we'll conclude, but give people a second to see if they've got something. Martha, I see your hand up.
Yes, we have a question. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning. So let us get this straight. The preliminary is supposed to be explained by the agent or by the title company, just to get that clear. Sometimes for us, it's a little bit tedious to go through. You guys are supposed to be familiar with the preliminary, I'm assuming. But for us as agents, we're not that vested in the wording in the preliminary. So we just want to get clear who actually is supposed to, any doubts or any questions that the client has, who's supposed to explain it to them?
Well, I think I said if they have questions, then they can call and we're happy to address those. I don't think that.
Most of our clients are always asking questions regarding the preliminary, and then we have to obviously, request you guys to explain it to them, because as agents, sometimes I don't know what I'm explaining, or I don't really know how to explain it, in other words. So we don't want to misguide the clients. So this, we're assuming this is you guys' job, right?
So what I can tell you what other agents do is that they'll deliver the prelim to their clients, and then they'll instruct their clients to reach out to us with specific questions or asking for things. Like there's some agents that will always ask their clients to reach out to us to say, can you please explain these items and order us a color map? That's just, everybody works differently. And that's one thing that I have seen with certain offices of how they kind of coach their buyers and sellers to contact us for any questions or what they need to have explained on the prelim.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
now
think that she's trying to say whose responsibility. It's our document, it's our stuff, it's our responsibility is what you're asking, Martha.
Yes, it is.
So, but it's it's still part of your job to look at it and see what's there. So
Right.
you are aware of it. We're not asking you to explain it
Okay.
by any means.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was
makes
the
sense?
question. Thank you for clearing it up, Linda.
Yeah, you're
I
welcome.
appreciate that. Thank you.
And what we do a lot is we collaborate with the agents because their clients will say, especially on the deed of trust, like, I only have one loan and it shows 3 and the other 3 are paid off. So we, you relay that information to us. We work as a team. Those things are all on there so that you're aware also as an agent of all of the challenges we have in getting to a smooth close of escrow. And we just work together with the clients and all the parties involved to try to get all of those items out of the way so that we can safely transition the property to the new buyer. Myrna, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes. Just want to know if you have the prelim in any other languages or suggestions for individuals that speak other languages besides English.
I don't know that. Do you
I
know
don't think
that,
we-
Jen?
We don't have the prelim in any other language than English because of just the nature of the business. We do have guides on understanding the documents. We have home buyers guides in Spanish and a couple other languages. We have some seller documents. So we have documents that help understand, but not the actual reports themselves.
Any suggestions or any other ideas on how we can take care of clients that speak other languages so that they are able to review the document and ask valid questions that can be addressed? I ask because someone like myself who represents, I would say about 90% of my clients are Spanish speaking only or prefer Spanish because that is their first language.
You know, I know that we have escrow officers that speak a number of different languages. And I think I see Nancy O on the call. Is that Nancy from our office? I believe that our Spanish speaking escrow staff will work in Spanish to help understand and explain the documents and work with reading them, but I'm not certain. And
I
it
think
looks
she
like
just
Nancy
unmuted.
had to drop off the call.
Oh.
But I will verify and we'll give you guys an update on that. But I do know that's one of the reasons that we try to make sure that we have staff that are multilingual so that we can make people whose English is not their first language comfortable with the transaction.
And I know that they'll talk Spanish to them, Myrna, so we're not going to do the loan documents because they're not ours, right? But our prelim, we could definitely, the escrow officers I know do that. But
Thank you.
there's two more questions.
More than
So
helpful.
Jane asked if the color coded easement map takes any extra, if it's any extra cost. No, Jane, it just takes a little bit longer to do. And then will this presentation be sent to the attendees? Of course. You signed up for the class, you will get this sometime later today. And if you ever want to learn anything else, we have a YouTube channel, Chicago Title Fresno YouTube channel. And we have lots of stuff. So now Stephanie's dropping your jaw because you're going to now be on YouTube stuff.
That was not disclosed ahead of time.
Oh, you signed a waiver, you don't remember? Anyway, so everyone's famous. Are there any other questions before we let everyone go?
I have a question.
Okay.
So in taking on a listing agreement, is it best to just have the client fill out that, what is it called? Statement of information or something, and then send it to you guys so we get that preliminary before it's even listed and we can send it to the buyer's agent, or just have it there on hand when we're opening up like pre-escrow?
I don't think so. I mean, everybody works differently, but from my perspective, I would say like if you give escrow your client's email and phone number, you know, when that's opened and let them know you're going to get this in here notification, complete the information, then generally I'm able to run the SI clearance with that. If we need more, we can get it, but my personal preference is that the statement of information asks for a lot of really detailed and specific information that you as agents might not want to be responsible for and keep in your files. So I would say just wait till we get to that point. But you did bring up a good point about pre-opening. And a lot of times, if you have a listing that you think it's going to be a more complicated vesting issue with trusts or power of attorney or people that have passed away, go ahead and send us documentation or have us pre-open it so that we can take a look at it and see if there's anything that needs to get addressed ahead of time so that we can kind of dive into that. And if the file calls for the SI at that point, then we're happy to reach out to the seller to get the information to run that before you get an offer accepted.
Okay, yeah, because I'd rather figure out ahead of time, even if I don't think it's going to be complicated, I'd
Yeah.
rather run something beforehand just in case we can, just, be
Totally.
proactive instead of reactive.
Always, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. And we also always say, get a copy of the current vesting deed as you're going out to the listing appointment. You can pull those online on our website or ask our customer service department for that. We can also do some basic checks for solar and things like that. But one of the main things, just to make sure all of your paperwork is in order, is make sure that the person you're meeting with for the listing is the same person that's listed in title on the deed, that's the most current deed on the property. And if not, have a conversation about what may have taken place, then come back to us and we'll help you work that out.
Jen, Nancy popped in on the chat and she does say that we have Spanish statement of information. So Mirna, that could help you, just having that information to give to them, to give to us. Not you being in the middle. You can hand it to them and then they can give it to us filled out.
Oh, sorry, her mic is not working.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is everybody's questions. Is there anything else in the chat? I think that we're good.
We're good.
So thank you so much for taking the time to jump on this call with us. We try to do some education every single month, and we'll make sure to invite you guys to the next class. We will send out the recording this afternoon. And as Linda mentioned, they're also all posted to our YouTube channel at Chicago Title Fresno. So you can go back and watch previous presentations. And we're here for you with any questions, any specific things that we can assist with, and look forward to tackling your next escrow. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.